The chill of the high desert evening bit through Willa Frost's thin shawl as she knelt beside the weathered barn, placing small chunks of salt pork and dried fish onto a flat stone, unaware that someone watched her every movement from the shadows. It was late September 1883, and Skidoo, California existed as little more than a mining camp scattered across the rocky slopes of the Panamint Range. Willa had arrived 3 weeks earlier with a traveling merchant's family, helping with their children in exchange for passage west. When the family moved on toward Los Angeles, she stayed behind, drawn by something she could not name. The landscape felt honest in its harshness, and after years of polite suffocation in Philadelphia drawing rooms, she craved that honesty like water. She had found work washing linens for the boarding house, barely earning enough for a corner room and 2 meals daily. But she noticed the cats immediately, those half-wild creatures that lived in the margins, hunting rats around the mining operations and making homes in abandoned structures. They reminded her of herself, she supposed, existing on the edges of a world that did not quite have space for them. The barn belonged to someone, she knew, but it sat far enough from the main cluster of buildings that she thought her evening visits went unnoticed. A large tabby approached first, keeping low to the ground, amber eyes locked on the food. 2 smaller cats, one calico and one solid gray, waited behind a broken wheel. "I know you are hungry," Willa said softly, backing away to give them room. "It is not much, but it is something." The voice that answered from behind nearly stopped her heart. "They have been getting fatter. I wondered why." Willa spun around, her hand flying to her throat. The man stood perhaps 10 feet away, tall and solid in the dimming light. He wore dusty work clothes and a worn hat pushed back on his head, revealing dark hair and a face weathered by sun and wind. His eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch, but not from fear. Something else entirely. "I am sorry," she stammered, heat flooding her cheeks despite the cool air. "I did not mean to trespass. I thought the barn was abandoned, or I would never have presumed to. How long have you been coming here?" He interrupted, his voice carrying a rough warmth that matched the landscape around them. 2 weeks, perhaps, since I discovered them." She twisted her hands in her skirt. "I will stop. I apologize for using your property without permission." He moved closer, his boots crunching on the rocky ground. The tabby, startled by his approach, grabbed a piece of pork and darted into the barn. The cowboy watched it go, then turned his attention back to Willa. In the fading light, she could see his face more clearly now, strong features, a mouth that looked like it knew how to smile but held itself in careful reserve, and those eyes. They studied her with an unsettling directness. "What is your name?" he asked. "Willa Frost, Boston, Philadelphia." He nodded as if this confirmed something. "I am Blake Harding. I run cattle in the valley below and keep horses here. The barn is mine." "Then I truly apologize, Mr. Harding. I will leave immediately and not return." She started to move past him, but his next words stopped her. "You belong in this place." Willa turned back, certain she had misheard. "Excuse me." Blake gestured around them, his hand encompassing the darkening desert, the stark mountains rising like sentinels, the endless sky beginning to fill with stars. "Most people from back east, they get here and count the days until they can leave. They hate the dust, the heat, the emptiness. They see nothing but what is missing." He looked at her again. "But you are out here feeding barn cats in the cold. That tells me something different." "It tells you I am foolish and do not respect property boundaries," Willa said, trying for lightness but feeling shaken by his words. "It tells me you see what is here, not what is not, that you notice the small things that need noticing." He pushed his hat back further. "You can keep coming. Feed them whenever you like." "I could not. It would be improper, and I have already imposed enough. Then come during daylight. I'm here most afternoons, working with the horses. That would be proper enough, I figure." Willa's heart hammered against her ribs. There was nothing improper in his tone or demeanor, yet everything about this moment felt significant in a way she could not articulate. "Why would you want that?" Blake was quiet for a long moment. "Because in 3 years of keeping this place, I never thought to feed them. I just let them hunt and fend for themselves. You have been here 2 weeks and noticed they needed help." He shrugged, looking almost uncomfortable. "I would like to know what else you see that I have stopped seeing." Before Willa could formulate a response, he tipped his hat and walked toward the barn, disappearing into its dark interior. She stood frozen, the evening wind pulling at her skirts and hair, feeling as though the ground had shifted beneath her feet. That night, lying on her narrow boarding-house bed, she replayed every word, every glance. Blake Harding unsettled her in ways she could not name. Men in Philadelphia had paid her court with flowery compliments and careful manners, saying nothing of substance while speaking volumes. Blake had spoken perhaps 50 words total, yet each one felt weighted with meaning. "You belong in this place." No one had ever said such a thing to her. In Philadelphia, she had always been too bookish, too opinionated, too interested in improper subjects. Her mother despaired of her ever making a suitable match. When the opportunity to go west had presented itself, Willa seized it like a lifeline, leaving behind the suffocating expectations and disappointed sighs. She returned the next afternoon, her heart in her throat, half expecting to find the barn deserted. But as she approached with her small bundle of food scraps, she heard movement from within. Blake emerged leading a beautiful chestnut mare, her coat gleaming in the bright sunlight. "Miss Frost," he said, acknowledgement and greeting combined, "Mr. Harding." She felt absurdly formal. "I brought something for the cats. They are inside. The tabby had kittens last night. I found them this morning in the loft." Delight broke across Willa's face. "May I see them?" Something shifted in Blake's expression, a softening around his eyes. "Go ahead. I need to work this mare, but I will be in the corral just there." Willa entered the barn, breathing in the familiar scent of hay and horses. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight penetrating the roof's gaps. She climbed the ladder to the loft carefully, mindful of her skirts, and found the tabby in a nest of old blankets. 4 tiny kittens nursed, their eyes still closed, their bodies impossibly small. "Oh," Willa breathed, crouching down at a respectful distance. "You beautiful girl. You clever, lovely thing." The tabby watched her warily but did not move. Willa set out food well away from the nest, then sat with her back against a support beam, content to simply observe. Time slipped away unmarked. The sounds of Blake working the horse drifted through the barn, his low voice, the mare's hoofbeats, the creak of leather. When she finally climbed down, the sun had moved considerably across the sky. Blake stood in the barn's entrance, one shoulder propped against the frame, watching her. "I apologize," Willa said. "I lost track of time." "So did I," he replied. "I kept thinking I should get back to the ranch, check on my men, but then I thought the cattle are not going anywhere and neither are you, apparently. I should go. I have work at the boarding house. Tomorrow." The single word held a question. "Tomorrow," Willa confirmed. She came every day after that. At first she told herself it was about the cats, about checking on the new mother and her kittens. But honesty, that quality she had sought in the desert landscape, demanded she acknowledge the truth. She came to see Blake. Their conversation started slowly, carefully, like 2 wild things circling each other. He told her about growing up in Nevada, about learning cattle and horses from his father, about coming to California 5 years ago and building his operation from nothing. She told him about Philadelphia, about books and learning, about feeling like she was suffocating in silk and propriety. "What did you want to do?" Blake asked one afternoon. They sat on the corral fence, watching 3 horses graze in the enclosure. "If you could have done anything." "Travel," Willa said immediately. "Study, learn about geology and natural history, visit places I had only read about." She laughed, but without bitterness. "Impractical dreams for a woman." "Why impractical? You are here, are you not? You traveled across the country." "To wash linens in a boarding house. For now." Blake turned to look at her. "But you noticed the cats. You climbed into a barn loft. You sit on a corral fence in the dust. Those do not seem like the actions of someone resigned to washing linens forever." Willa met his eyes, finding something there that made her pulse quicken. "What do you think I should do, Mr. Harding?" "Blake," he said. "I think you should call me Blake. Then you must call me Willa." "Willa." He said her name like he was tasting it. "I think you should stop asking permission for what you want. I think you should just reach out and take it." The air between them felt charged, heavy with unspoken things. Willa's mouth went dry. "That is not how the world works for women. Maybe it should be." Blake jumped down from the fence, then turned to help her down. His hands spanned her waist easily, and he lowered her with careful strength. For a moment, they stood close enough that she could see the different shades of brown in his eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from him. Then he stepped back, clearing his throat. "I should get back. The men will think I have abandoned them entirely." Willa watched him saddle his horse, economical movements born of long practice. Before he mounted, he paused. "There is a canyon about 5 miles east of here, fossils in the rocks. Ancient shells and such. I could show you if you wanted. Sunday maybe if you do not work." Joy flared in Willa's chest, bright and sudden. "I would like that very much." Sunday arrived clear and cool, autumn asserting itself in the high desert. Blake appeared at the boarding house with 2 horses, one of them the gentle mare he had been working. Willa had borrowed a split skirt from another boarder, earning raised eyebrows from the landlady but not caring. They rode east into the Panamint Range, following paths only Blake seemed to see. Willa had ridden as a child but not in years, and her body remembered the rhythm with grateful surprise. The landscape unfolded around them in shades of rust and gold, rock formations sculpted by wind and time into shapes of wild beauty. Blake led her into a narrow canyon where the walls rose steep and striated on either side. He dismounted and helped her down, then walked to the rock face. "Here," he said, running his hand over the stone. "See." Willa stepped close, and there they were, perfect spiral shells preserved in the rock, proof of an ancient sea that had once covered this now dry land. She reached out with trembling fingers, tracing the delicate ridges. "How is it possible?" she whispered. "How can the world change so completely?" "Slow," Blake said. "So slow you do not notice while it is happening. Then one day you look around and everything is different." She turned to find him watching her, not the fossils. "Blake," he reached up and touched her cheek, his calloused fingers gentle. "I am trying to go slow, Willa. Trying to do this properly, but you make it difficult." "I have never wanted proper," she said, her voice barely audible over the pounding of her heart. "Not really." Blake's kiss, when it came, tasted like dust and hope in coming home. Willa melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, feeling the solid warmth of him against her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I am not a man of pretty words," he said roughly. "I work cattle and horses. I smell like livestock more often than not. I can offer you a ranch house that needs work and a life that will be hard more days than easy." "Blake, let me finish." He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "But I will never make you smaller than you are. I will never ask you to dim yourself down." If you want to study rocks and fossils, we will ride out to find them. If you want to read every book ever written, I will build you shelves. If you want to just be without explaining or apologizing, you can do that too. Tears burned in Willa's eyes. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you feed hungry cats. I know you climbed into my barn loft without hesitation. I know you look at this desert and see beauty where others see emptiness. His thumb brushed away a tear that had escaped. I know that I have been half asleep for 3 years and you woke me up. I am scared, Willa admitted. Everything is happening so fast. Then we slowed down. But Willa, I need you to know I am not playing at this. I am not passing time. When I said you belong in this place, I meant it, and I am starting to think you belong with me. Willa kissed him again, pouring everything she could not say into the press of her lips against his. Blake gathered her close, and they stood in that ancient canyon, surrounded by evidence of vanished oceans and transformed worlds, writing the beginning of their own transformation. They rode back as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of rose and amber. At the edge of town, Blake reached over and took her hand. Have dinner with me, at the ranch. Let me show you what I am offering. Willa hesitated only a moment before nodding. Tomorrow. Blake's ranch sat in a valley carved between the mountains, where a precious spring provided enough water for cattle and horses. The house was simple but sturdy, built from local wood and stone. Inside, it held a masculine spareness that spoke of a man living alone, but Willa could see its potential immediately. Blake had clearly made an effort. The main room was clean. A fire burned in the stone fireplace, and the table was set with mismatched but serviceable dishes. The dinner itself was simple beef, beans, cornbread, but prepared with care. I am not much of a cook, Blake admitted, looking uncharacteristically nervous. It is wonderful, Willa assured him, and meant it. She had eaten elaborate meals in Philadelphia that tasted like nothing. This simple food, shared in this simple room with this complicated man, tasted like life itself. After dinner, Blake gave her a tour. The house had 3 rooms: the main living area with its fireplace and kitchen space, a bedroom, and a smaller room currently used for storage. Outside, the barn and outbuildings stood solid against the darkening sky. I know it is not much, Blake said as they stood on the porch looking out at the valley. It is everything, Willa replied. She turned to him. Blake, I need to tell you something. I have no dowry, no family connections. No money at all beyond the few coins I earn weekly. If you are thinking of me as a wife, you should know I bring nothing practical to a marriage. Blake's laugh was low and genuine. Willa, I have cattle and horses and land. I do not need money. What I need is someone who sees the world the way you do, someone who makes me remember why I loved this place enough to build a life here. I have been here only a month. People will talk. Let them. He pulled her close, his arms a warm circle in the cooling evening. I am 30 years old. I have worked hard, built something worth having. I'm not interested in what is proper or what people will say. I am interested in you. Willa rested her head against his chest, hearing his heart beat strong and steady beneath her ear. I am 22, old enough to make my own choices. And what do you choose? She looked up at him. You, this, all of it. Blake's kiss was different this time, less urgent, more certain, a claiming and a promise combined. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were dark with emotion. Marry me, Willa, not someday, not eventually. Soon. How soon? How soon can you be ready? Willa laughed, the sound bright with joy and disbelief. Blake Harding, this is insane. Probably. He grinned, and she realized it was the first time she had seen him truly smile. It transformed his face, making him look younger and lighter. Say yes anyway. Yes, she whispered. Then louder. Yes. The wedding took place 3 weeks later in Skidoo's tiny church, such as it was really just a room in a building used for multiple purposes. Willa wore a simple dress she had sewn herself from fabric Blake insisted on buying her. Blake wore his cleanest work clothes and looked uncomfortable but determined. The ceremony was brief. The preacher, a circuit rider who came through monthly, pronounced them man and wife with efficient cheer. The witnesses were the boarding house landlady, looking skeptical, and Blake's foreman, a weathered man named Tom who shook Willa's hand with rough gentleness and told her she was getting a good man. "I know," Willa said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. They rode back to the ranch in the afternoon light, Willa on the mare that she now thought of as hers. Blake had shown her which horse was which, told her she could ride any of them, but she favored the chestnut with her kind eyes and steady temperament. The ranch house looked different now that it was hers. Blake carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing at the absurdity and rightness of it. Inside, he set her down carefully, and the laughter faded into something else. "I have wanted you here since the moment I saw you kneeling by the barn," Blake said, his voice rough with emotion. "Wanted you here so badly I could barely think straight." Willa reached up to touch his face, feeling the slight rasp of stubble under her fingers. "I am here now. I am yours." Their wedding night unfolded with a tenderness that brought tears to Willa's eyes. Blake loved her with careful attention, learning what made her gasp and sigh, taking his time despite the hunger she felt in his touch. Afterward, they lay tangled together in his bed, their bed now, and Willa felt a contentment so profound it frightened her. "What are you thinking?" Blake asked, his hand stroking lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "That I cannot believe this is real. That I keep waiting to wake up back in Philadelphia, being scolded for reading instead of embroidering." Blake pressed a kiss to her temple. "It is real. You are here. You are mine and I am yours. Promise me something," Willa said. "Anything. Promise me we will always be honest with each other, even when it is hard, especially when it is hard." Blake was quiet for a moment. "I promise. But Willa, you need to promise me something too." "What?" "Promise me you will tell me when you need things. I am not good at guessing. If you are unhappy or scared or wanting something, you have to say it outright." "I promise," Willa said, sealing it with a kiss. The first weeks of marriage were an adjustment. Willa had never run a household, had never cooked for a working man who came in famished from long days with cattle and horses. She burned meals, struggled with the wood stove, felt frustrated and inadequate more days than not. Blake never complained. He ate burned beans without comment, showed her how to manage the temperamental stove, helped her learn the rhythms of ranch life. When she cried in frustration over a ruined dinner, he pulled her into his arms and told her he had eaten worse on the trail. "I want to be good at this," Willa said against his chest. "You will be. You are already good at the things that matter. Burning supper matters." "No," Blake said firmly. "You matter. The rest we will figure out." Tom, the foreman, proved unexpectedly kind. He showed Willa how the ranch operated, introduced her to the small crew of men who worked for Blake, and treated her with a respect that made her feel less like an interloper and more like the lady of the house. The men kept their distance but tipped their hats to her, and slowly she learned their names and their stories. The cats, of course, followed her from the barn to the ranch house. The tabby mother and her kittens, now growing fast and tumbling over each other in play, took up residence in the barn near the house. Willa spent hours watching them, fascinated by their interactions and independence. "You love those cats more than is strictly reasonable," Blake teased one evening, finding her in the barn again. "They were my first friends here," Willa replied. "Before you." Blake settled beside her in the hay. "Am I your friend then? You are my husband. Can I not be both?" Willa turned to look at him. Yes, you are both. My friend, my husband, my home. Blake kissed her slowly, deeply, and one thing led to another until they were tangled in the hay, laughing and kissing and loving each other while the cats watched with feline indifference. October gave way to November, and the high desert grew colder. Willa learned to manage the ranch house, to cook meals that did not burn, to make bread that rose properly. She learned the names of the cattle in the near pasture, the quirks of each horse, the way the light changed over the valley through the course of a day. Blake took her riding whenever he could, showing her corners of the ranch she had not seen. They found more fossils, ancient bones, strange rock formations. Blake started bringing home books from his infrequent trips to larger towns, watching Willa's face light up with each new title. "You do not have to buy me things," she protested after he returned with 3 volumes on natural history. "I want to," Blake said simply. "I like making you happy." At night, they learned each other in the privacy of their bedroom. Willa discovered that her quiet, reserved husband was neither quiet nor reserved when they were alone. He loved with an intensity that left her breathless, and he seemed to take profound pleasure in her pleasure, learning her body with the same careful attention he gave to everything he valued. "I love you," Willa said one night, the words escaping before she could think better of them. Blake went very still above her. Then he lowered his forehead to hers, his breath coming hard. "Say it again." "I love you, Blake Harding." "I love you too," he said roughly. "So much it scares me sometimes." They loved each other then with something approaching desperation, holding tight as if they could fuse themselves into one being through sheer will and desire. Winter arrived in full force by December, bringing cold that surprised Willa with its intensity. The desert that baked under summer sun could freeze at night, and snow dusted the higher peaks. Blake worked harder than ever, ensuring the cattle had access to water, that the horses stayed healthy, that nothing was lost to the cold. Willa found her own routines. She took over some of the bookkeeping for the ranch, discovering she had a head for numbers. She started collecting specimens, interesting rocks, fossils, dried plants, organizing them carefully, and making notes in a journal Blake bought her. She wrote letters to an aunt in Philadelphia, the only family member who had not condemned her Western adventure, describing her new life with careful honesty. Christmas approached, and with it, a challenge Willa had not anticipated. Blake mentioned that some of the neighboring ranchers and their families gathered for a celebration, and they were expected to attend. "I am not sure I am ready to meet everyone," Willa admitted. "What if they do not like me?" "Then they are fools," Blake said. "But Willa, you are going to have to meet folks eventually. This is a small community. We depend on each other out here. I know. I just worry they will think I am strange." Blake pulled her onto his lap, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You are strange, so am I. We will be strange together." The Christmas gathering took place at the largest ranch in the area, owned by a man named Samuel Crawford and his wife Martha. The house was packed with people, ranchers, miners, townspeople from Skidoo and beyond. Willa felt overwhelmed immediately, unused to crowds after months of relative isolation. Martha Crawford, a sturdy woman with kind eyes, took Willa under her wing immediately. "You must be Blake's bride. We have been so curious to meet you." "Curious," Willa repeated nervously. "Of course. Blake has kept to himself for years. We were starting to think he would die a bachelor." Martha led Willa into the kitchen, where several other women worked on the meal. "Ladies, this is Willa Harding. Let us make her feel welcome." The women were friendly if curious. They asked questions about Philadelphia, about how she met Blake, about her adjustment to ranch life. Willa answered as honestly as she could, feeling herself relax as the conversation flowed. One woman, younger than the others and heavily pregnant, was particularly warm. "I am Sarah Mitchell," she introduced herself. "My husband runs the mining operation north of Skidoo. I came from St. Louis 2 years ago, so I know what it is like to be the newcomer." "It is harder than I expected," Willa admitted. "Everything out here is harder than expected," Sarah said cheerfully. "But it is also better somehow, more real." Willa found Blake later talking with a group of men near the fireplace. He caught her eye and smiled, excusing himself to come to her. "How are you managing?" "Better than I feared." "The women are kind. I told you." He took her hand. "Are you ready to go home?" The fact that he called the ranch home, that he thought of it as their shared place, warmed Willa more than the fire. "Not quite yet. I am actually enjoying myself." Blake's smile widened. "Good. Then let us stay a while." They left as the evening grew late, riding home under a sky brilliant with stars. The cold bit through even Willa's heavy cloak, and she was grateful when the ranch house came into view, lamplight glowing in the windows because Blake had left one burning. Inside, they shed their heavy outdoor clothes and stood by the fire warming themselves. Blake pulled Willa against him, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Thank you for going tonight," he said into her hair. "I know it was difficult. It was not as bad as I feared. People were kind." "They could see what I see," Blake said. "That you belong here." Willa turned in his arms. "Do you truly believe that? Even now, after months, do you truly believe I belong more than ever?" Blake's expression was serious, intent. "Willa, you have made this house a home. You have made me remember what it is to be alive, not just existing. Every day with you is better than any day before you." Willa kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude into the gesture. They made love in front of the fire, slow and tender, a reaffirmation of all they had become to each other. January brought harsh weather, a cold snap that tested everyone. Blake worked brutal hours, trying to keep the livestock safe. Willa did what she could, helping where possible, keeping the house warm and meals ready, not complaining when Blake came in exhausted and could barely speak before falling into bed. One night, a blizzard struck with terrifying suddenness. Blake was out checking on cattle in the far pasture when the storm hit. Willa watched the snow come down in thick, blinding sheets, terror clawing at her throat. Tom and another man saddled up to go look for Blake, but Willa made them wait another hour, knowing Blake knew the land and could find his way better than anyone. She was proved right when Blake stumbled through the door, covered in snow and shaking with cold. Willa cried out and rushed to him, helping him out of his frozen clothing. She guided him to the fire, wrapped him in blankets, made him drink hot coffee until the shaking subsided. "I thought I had lost you," she said, her voice breaking. Blake pulled her onto his lap, holding her tight despite the blankets. "I am all right. I am here. Promise me you will be more careful. Promise me you will not take foolish risks. Willa, promise me." She was crying now, all the fear pouring out. "I cannot lose you, I cannot." Blake cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I promise. I will be more careful, but Willa, this life is risky sometimes. I cannot promise I will never be in danger." "Then promise you will always come back to me." "That I can promise." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I will always come back to you." The storm lasted 3 days. They lost some cattle, but not as many as they might have. Blake was subdued in the aftermath, aware of how close he had come to disaster. He started teaching Willa more about the ranch operations, showing her records and accounts, explaining his plans and concerns. "Why are you telling me all this?" Willa asked one evening as they pored over ledgers. "Because you are my partner," Blake said. "If something happens to me, you need to know how to manage, and because you have good ideas. I want your input." Willa felt something settle in her chest, some final piece of uncertainty. Blake truly saw her as an equal, truly valued her mind as much as her presence. "I think we should diversify," she said slowly. "Not rely only on cattle, perhaps horses for breeding. There is always demand for good working animals." Blake considered this. That would require different facilities, more specialized knowledge. "But you know horses. You are better with them than with cattle anyway," he grinned. "True enough. Let me think about it." They discussed it over the following weeks, making plans, dreaming together. Willa drew sketches of how they might modify the barn, what stock they might start with. Blake rode to neighboring ranches, talking to men who bred horses, learning what he could. "You are good for me," he told Willa one night in bed. "You push me to think bigger." "You are good for me too," Willa replied. "You make me feel capable. You are capable." February brought the first hints of spring, the high desert beginning to wake from its winter sleep. Willa realized she had been at the ranch for 5 months now, married to Blake for 4. It felt like a lifetime and no time at all. She also realized she had missed her monthly courses. Twice now. The recognition sent a jolt through her system, part fear, part excitement, wholly overwhelming. She said nothing to Blake at first, wanting to be certain, but her body told its own story. The slight nausea in the mornings, the tenderness in her breasts, the bone-deep tiredness that struck without warning. When she finally told Blake, he was working in the corral with a young stallion. She stood at the fence and called his name, her heart in her throat. "What is it?" He saw her expression and immediately came over, concern written across his face. "Are you all right?" "I am pregnant," Willa said, the words feeling strange in her mouth. Blake went absolutely still. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without a doctor, yes." His face transformed, wonder and joy breaking across it like sunrise. "A baby. We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Willa asked, suddenly uncertain. Blake vaulted the fence and swept her into his arms, spinning her once before setting her down carefully. "Happy?" "Willa, I am more than happy. I am terrified and thrilled and so full of love I can barely stand it." They stood holding each other while the horses moved in the corral behind them, a perfect moment suspended in the bright February day. The pregnancy progressed normally, though Willa found the experience both fascinating and frustrating. Her body changed in ways that startled her, becoming something both familiar and foreign. Blake was attentive to the point of being overbearing, worrying over every small complaint. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," Willa finally snapped after he tried to prevent her from lifting a basket of laundry. Blake held up his hands. "I know, I am sorry, I just want you safe." "I will be safe. Women have been doing this since time began." Willa softened, seeing the genuine fear in his eyes. "Blake, I am all right. The baby is all right. We are both healthy and strong." Martha Crawford came to visit regularly, bringing advice and practical help. She had raised 5 children and knew what was needed. Sarah Mitchell, now with a new baby daughter, shared her experiences and became a true friend. "The birth will be hard," Martha said plainly. "I will not lie to you about that, but you are young and healthy. You should come through it fine." Willa appreciated the honesty more than she could say. She read every book she could find on childbirth and infant care, preparing as methodically as she would for any important project. Blake built a cradle, the wood smooth and carefully joined, evidence of his carpenter skills and his love. Summer arrived with its brutal heat. Willa, huge with child and uncomfortable, spent the hottest hours indoors, emerging only in early morning and evening. The baby kicked constantly, and she would rest her hands on her belly, marveling at the life growing inside her. "Do you hope for a boy or a girl?" Blake asked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sun set. "I do not care as long as the baby is healthy," Willa said. "What about you?" "The same. Though I admit The idea of a little girl with your eyes would be something to see, or a little boy with your stubbornness. Blake laughed. Heaven help us all. The baby came on a sweltering day in late August. Willa's labor started at dawn, and Blake immediately sent for Martha and Sarah. He stayed with Willa through the morning, holding her hand, letting her squeeze until his fingers went numb, his face pale with worry. Martha arrived and shooed him from the room. "This is women's work. Go chop wood or something useful." Blake looked to Willa, who nodded. "Go, I will be all right." The labor lasted through the afternoon and into the evening. Willa discovered reserves of strength she had not known she possessed, her body working with single-minded focus. When the baby finally emerged as the sun was setting, the cry that filled the room was the sweetest sound Willa had ever heard. "A boy," Martha announced, placing the squalling infant on Willa's chest. "A healthy, strong boy." Willa looked down at her son, at his red face and dark hair, and felt love so fierce it was almost painful. "Blake," she whispered. "Someone fetch Blake." Blake burst into the room moments later, his face wild with worry and hope. He stopped at the sight of Willa holding the baby, and his eyes went bright with tears. "Come meet your son," Willa said softly. Blake approached as if in a dream, sitting carefully on the bed and looking down at the tiny person they had created. "He is perfect," he said, his voice rough. "Willa, he is perfect. What should we name him?" Willa asked. They had discussed names but never settled on anything definitively. Blake traced a gentle finger down the baby's cheek. "Benjamin," he said. "For my father, Benjamin Harding." "Benjamin," Willa repeated, testing it. "Yes." "That is right." Martha and Sarah cleaned up and left them alone with their new son. Benjamin nursed hungrily, and Willa marveled at the instinct of it, the way her body knew what to do. Blake stayed close, his hand resting protectively on her shoulder. "You are amazing," he said. "The strongest, bravest woman I have ever known." "I am exhausted," Willa said honestly, "and sore in places I did not know existed. But you did it. You brought our son into the world." Willa looked up at him, seeing the man she had fallen in love with by a barn, feeding cats in the gathering dark. "We did it," she corrected. "Together." The first months with Benjamin were a blur of feedings and diaper changes and sleepless nights. Willa was grateful for the experience she had gained helping with the merchant family's children, but nothing truly prepared anyone for the reality of a newborn. Blake helped wherever he could, walking the floor with Benjamin when he cried at night, changing diapers without complaint, giving Willa breaks to sleep or simply sit in silence. She fell in love with him all over again, watching him with their son. "You are a natural father," she told him one night, watching him cradle Benjamin with confident gentleness. "I am terrified every moment that I will do something wrong," Blake admitted, "but I love him so much it hurts." "I know exactly what you mean." Benjamin grew and thrived. By his first birthday, he was walking and getting into everything, his curiosity as boundless as his energy. Willa chased after him while managing the household and helping Blake with the ranch accounts. The horse breeding operation was showing promise, and several ranchers had already purchased animals from them. Life settled into a rhythm both challenging and deeply satisfying. Willa had never been happier, though she was more tired than she had ever been in Philadelphia. This was real, earned happiness, built on hard work and genuine partnership. When Benjamin was 2, Willa realized she was pregnant again. Blake's joy was tempered by worry. The first birth had been difficult, and he feared for her. But this pregnancy was easier, and the birth, while still hard, went more quickly. Their daughter arrived on a cool spring morning, smaller than Benjamin had been but just as healthy. Blake held her with tears streaming down his face, and Willa knew they had chosen her name correctly. "Hope," Blake said, looking down at his daughter. Hope Harding. Because she represents hope, Willa said softly. Hope for the future. Because you gave me hope when I had none, Blake corrected. Because you appeared in my life like a miracle and everything has been better since. With 2 young children, life became even more hectic. But Willa discovered she was good at balancing everything, at managing chaos with grace. Blake hired a woman from town to help with the housework, giving Willa more time with the children and her scientific interests. She had continued collecting specimens, and her journal of observations had grown to multiple volumes. Sarah, seeing her work, suggested she submit an article to a scientific journal. Willa laughed at first, but Sarah was serious. You have made real observations. You should share them. Encouraged by both Sarah and Blake, Willa carefully wrote up her findings on desert plant adaptations and sent the article to a natural history journal. She expected nothing, so when an acceptance letter arrived 6 months later, she stood in shock, reading the words over and over. Blake. She shouted, running to find him. They are going to publish it. They want to publish my article. Blake swept her into his arms, spinning her around. Of course they do. You are brilliant. I am a ranch wife with no formal education. You are a scientist who makes careful observations and draws intelligent conclusions, Blake corrected. Do not diminish yourself. The article appeared in print the following year, and several other journals requested contributions. Willa began a correspondence with other naturalists, male and female, discussing observations and theories. She felt intellectually alive in a way she had never experienced, even in Philadelphia. Benjamin started helping Blake with the horses when he was 5, showing a natural affinity for the animals. Hope was quieter, more observant, reminding Willa of herself as a child. She liked to sit with her mother while Willa worked on her specimens, asking endless questions. The years passed in a blur of work and family and love. Blake and Willa added onto the house, creating more space for their growing children and Willa's scientific work. The ranch prospered, the horse breeding operation becoming regionally known for quality stock. When Benjamin was 10 and Hope was 8, Willa discovered she was pregnant again, a surprise given her age. She was 36 now, older than was ideal for childbearing, but the pregnancy progressed normally. Their second son arrived in the fall, a healthy baby with Blake's dark eyes and Willa's determined chin. They named him Thomas, for Tom the foreman who had become like family over the years. Tom himself, now nearing 60 and still working the ranch, was honored and flustered by the gesture. You did not have to do that, he protested. You have been loyal and kind and more help than we can ever repay, Blake said firmly. This is the least we could do. The children adored their baby brother. Benjamin was old enough to be genuinely helpful, and Hope appointed herself his protector, watching over him with fierce devotion. Willa, watching her family grow and thrive, felt a contentment so profound it brought tears to her eyes. This life, this place, these people, they were everything she had never known she wanted. One evening, when Thomas was 2 and the older children were finally in bed, Willa and Blake sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. The cat's descendants of the barn cats she had fed so long ago prowled in the twilight, hunting and playing. You ever regret it? Blake asked suddenly. Staying here, marrying me. Willa turned to look at him, seeing the man she had loved for 14 years now, his face lined by sun and work but still handsome, still capable of making her heart race. Not for a single moment. Do you regret taking a chance on a strange woman feeding your barn cats? Blake pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. Best decision I ever made. You belong in this place, Willa. I knew it the moment I saw you. You belong to me, Willa replied, and I belong to you. They sat in comfortable silence, years of shared life allowing them to simply be together without needing words. Inside, their children slept safely. Around them, the ranch they had built together settled into night. Above, the stars blazed in the desert sky, constant and bright. The years continued to unfold. Benjamin grew tall and strong, taking over more of the ranch work as Blake's body started showing the wear of decades of hard labor. He was a natural horseman, even better than Blake, with an instinctive understanding of the animals that drew buyers from across California and Nevada. Hope pursued education with single-minded determination. Willa and Blake sent her to a proper school in Los Angeles when she was 16, though it nearly broke their hearts to have her so far away. She wrote long letters home about her studies, her dreams of becoming a teacher herself one day. Thomas was the surprise, quieter than his siblings but with a sharp mind for business. He started keeping the ranch books when he was just 12, finding ways to save money and increase profits that neither Blake nor Willa had considered. When Benjamin was 20, he announced he wanted to marry the daughter of a neighboring rancher, a sweet girl named Alice who could ride as well as any man. Blake and Willa gave their blessing gladly, seeing in the young couple something of their own love story. The wedding took place at the ranch, with what seemed like half the territory in attendance. Willa watched her son marry and felt the strange bittersweetness of seeing him become his own man. Blake held her hand throughout the ceremony, his grip tight, sharing her mixed emotions. "Where did the time go?" Willa whispered as Benjamin and Alice were pronounced husband and wife. "I do not know," Blake replied, "but I am grateful for every moment of it." Hope returned from Los Angeles with teaching credentials and a fierce determination to bring proper education to the scattered children of the mining camps and ranches. She set up a small school in Skidoo, teaching anyone who wanted to learn. Blake and Willa helped her buy supplies and books, proud beyond measure of her dedication. Thomas, at 18, announced he wanted to expand the ranch operations, to buy adjacent land that had come available. He presented a detailed business plan, showing projected costs and profits, making a case so solid that Blake could only shake his head in admiration. "When did you grow up?" Blake asked his youngest son. "I have been watching and learning," Thomas replied with a grin. "From the best." With Thomas managing the business side and Benjamin handling the horses, Blake finally allowed himself to slow down. He was in his 50s now, his body carrying the accumulated wear of decades of hard physical labor. He still worked, but at a more reasonable pace, spending more time with Willa and their grandchildren. Benjamin and Alice had 3 children in quick succession, 2 boys and a girl. Willa found being a grandmother both delightful and strange, holding these tiny people who carried her blood but represented a new generation. Blake was surprisingly good with the grandchildren, patient and playful in ways he rarely showed otherwise. "You have mellowed," Willa teased him one afternoon, watching him let his grandson climb all over him. "I have learned what matters," Blake replied, "and what does not." Hope married later, choosing a widower with 2 young children who needed a mother as much as a wife. She was 28, older than most brides, but happy in a way that made Willa's heart sing. Her husband, David, was a kind man who treated Hope's intelligence as an asset rather than a liability. Thomas married a Mexican woman named Alina, whose family had ranched in California for generations. She brought her own money and land to the marriage, making Thomas and Alina a formidable partnership. They built their house on ranch land, choosing to stay close rather than striking out on their own. Willa, watching her children build their own lives and families, felt a deep satisfaction. She had given them something she never had growing up: the freedom to be themselves, to pursue their own paths while knowing they were loved unconditionally. She continued her scientific work, now with a reputation that brought correspondence from prominent naturalists. She published regularly, her observations on desert ecology gaining recognition. Several universities tried to recruit her, but she had no interest in leaving the ranch. "My laboratory is here," she told Blake when yet another letter arrived. "Why would I leave?" Blake, reading the letter over her shoulder, kissed the top of her head. "They do not understand that you found what you were looking for, that you are happy." "Are you happy?" Willa asked, turning to look at him. "Truly?" Blake considered the question seriously, as he always did when she asked something important. "I am more than happy. I am content. I am fulfilled. I have lived a good life with the woman I love, built something worth having, raised children who are making their own way. What more could I want?" "To not have that bad knee that aches when it rains," Willa suggested lightly. Blake laughed. "Well, yes, that too." They celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary with a party that filled the ranch house and spilled out onto the grounds. Friends and family came from across the territory, bringing food and stories and warm wishes. Willa looked around at the gathering, at the life they had built, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "Thank you," she said to Blake during a quiet moment. "For what?" "For seeing me. For letting me be myself. For building this life with me." Blake pulled her close, holding her in the middle of the party like they were the only two people there. "I should be thanking you. You saved me, Willa. I was just existing before you came along. You taught me how to live." That night, after everyone had gone home and the house was finally quiet, they lay in bed holding hands. "You remember the night I found you feeding the barn cats?" Blake asked into the darkness. "Every detail," Willa replied. "I was so embarrassed to be caught trespassing. I thought you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. You, kneeling in the dust, caring for creatures no one else noticed." He turned on his side to face her. "I knew right then that you were different, that you might be the one who could make me feel alive again." "I was scared of you at first," Willa admitted. "You were so intense, so direct, but also the first person who ever looked at me and saw who I really was. I love who you really are. I love you too, always." The years continued their steady march. Blake's health began to decline as he entered his 60s, nothing specific but a general slowing down. Willa noticed him moving more carefully, resting more often, though he never complained. She adjusted their routines without comment, understanding that pride prevented him from acknowledging his limitations. They traveled less, staying closer to home. But Willa ensured they still had adventures, riding out to their favorite spots in the surrounding desert, watching sunsets from the porch, spending long evenings in conversation. The passion between them had mellowed but not disappeared, their physical relationship now more about comfort and connection than urgency. When Blake was 63, he had a fall from a horse that might have killed a younger man. As it was, he broke several ribs and his left arm. Willa nursed him through the recovery with determined care, and Blake, frustrated by his enforced idleness, was not the easiest patient. "I am useless," he snapped one afternoon. "You are healing," Willa corrected firmly, "and you are hardly useless. You still have the best eye for horses of anyone I know. Benjamin comes to you for advice constantly." "Advice is not the same as doing." Willa sat on the bed beside him. "Blake Harding, you have worked every day of your life since you were old enough to sit a horse. Is it so terrible to rest for a few weeks?" Blake's expression softened. "I am not good at being still, I know, but you will heal faster if you let yourself rest." She took his good hand. "And I rather enjoy having you captive for conversation." Blake's laugh turned into a wince as his ribs protested. "You are enjoying this, are you not?" "A little," Willa admitted with a smile. You are always so busy, it is nice to have you to myself." He pulled her down for a careful kiss. "I am lucky to have you. We are lucky to have each other." Blake recovered slowly, never quite regaining the physical capability he once had. But he adapted, finding new ways to contribute, spending more time with the grandchildren and great-grandchildren who now populated the ranch. Willa continued her work, though her own body was showing signs of age. Her hands, once so deft with specimens and notebooks, sometimes ached with arthritis. Her eyes required spectacles for reading, but her mind stayed sharp, and she continued making observations and publishing findings. When Blake was 68 and Willa was 60, they took a trip to Los Angeles to visit Hope and her family. It was the furthest they had traveled in years, and the city felt overwhelming after so long in the desert. But they enjoyed seeing their daughter in her element, teaching and thriving. "Are you happy?" Willa asked Hope one evening while the men talked business. "Very," Hope replied without hesitation. "David is a good man and the children have accepted me fully, and I am teaching, doing work I find meaningful." "I am so proud of you," Willa said, "of all you have accomplished." Hope took her mother's hand. "I learned from you. You showed me that a woman can be intelligent and educated and still have a family, that we do not have to choose." "It was not easy," Willa admitted. "There were many days I felt I was failing at everything, but you kept going. You kept learning and growing and being yourself. That was the gift you gave me." On the journey home, Blake and Willa talked about their children, about the grandchildren, about all they had built together. The desert landscape rolled past, familiar and beloved. No regrets. Blake asked, echoing his question from so many years ago. "Not a single one," Willa replied. "You. Only that I did not have more years with you. I wish I could have found you sooner, had more time." Willa felt tears prick her eyes. "We have had 33 years. That is more than many people get. I would take 100 if I could have them." "So would I." They held hands the rest of the way home, comfortable in the silence of long companionship. Life at the ranch continued its steady rhythm. Benjamin and Alice now had 6 children, ranging from teenagers to a baby girl. Thomas and Alina had 4 children, all showing signs of being as business-savvy as their father. Hope visited regularly, bringing David and her stepchildren, now fully grown with children of their own. Willa sometimes felt overwhelmed by the size of their extended family, the sheer number of people who existed, because she had stopped to feed some barn cats 35 years ago. It seemed impossible that such a small action could have led to all of this. Blake celebrated his 70th birthday surrounded by family. He looked at the gathered crowd and shook his head in wonder. "How did we get so many people?" he asked Willa. "We loved each other," Willa replied simply. "And we built something worth having. The rest followed." That night, lying in bed, Blake pulled Willa close. "I am tired," he admitted. "More tired than I have ever been." Fear clutched at Willa's heart. Should I send for the doctor? No, not that kind of tired. Just the bone-deep weariness of a long life well lived. He kissed her forehead. "I am ready whenever it comes, but I hope I have a few more years with you first." "You had better," Willa said fiercely. "I am not ready to lose you. You will never lose me. I will always be here in this ranch, in our children, in every corner of the life we built together." Blake lived another 3 years, his body slowly failing but his mind staying sharp. He spent his days watching the ranch operations, offering advice when asked, playing with great-grandchildren who climbed on him fearlessly. He and Willa talked endlessly, sharing memories and observations, still learning from each other after decades of marriage. When the end came, it was peaceful. Blake died in his sleep one spring morning, Willa beside him as she had been for 38 years. She woke to find him gone, his face peaceful, his hand still holding hers. The grief nearly broke her. For weeks, she moved through the days in a fog, going through motions but feeling hollowed out. Her children gathered around her, offering support and love, but nothing could fill the Blake-sized hole in her life. One evening, she walked out to the barn where she had first fed the cats so many years ago. Descendants of those original cats still lived here, hunting mice and napping in the sun. Willa sat in the dust, remembering that night, Blake's voice saying, "You belong in this place." "I do belong," she said aloud to the empty air, "because you made it so. Because you saw me and loved me and gave me a life beyond anything I dreamed possible." The grief did not disappear, but it slowly transformed into something more bearable. Willa found comfort in the ranch routines, in her scientific work, in the family that surrounded her. She lived another 12 years, dying at 72 with her children and grandchildren gathered around her bed. Her last conscious thought was of Blake, of that first night by the barn, of all the years they had shared. And she smiled, knowing she was going to him, that they would be together again. Benjamin, now in his 50s and running the ranch with his own sons, stood at his mother's grave beside his father's and marveled at the legacy they had left. Two people who had found each other by chance had built something that would last for generations. He thought of the story his mother had told him many times, about feeding barn cats and meeting a cowboy who told her she belonged. Such a small moment to build a life on, yet it had been enough. Looking out across the ranch his parents had built, at the family they had raised, at the land they had loved and nurtured, Benjamin understood what his father had seen all those years ago. His mother had belonged here, not because of the place itself, but because she and his father had belonged to each other. And in that belonging, they had created something beautiful and lasting. The ranch continued, generation after generation, but always carrying the story of Willa and Blake, the woman who fed barn cats and the cowboy who saw her heart. Their love story became family legend, told and retold, a reminder that the greatest love stories often begin with the smallest acts of kindness, and that finding where you belong is not about geography, but about finding the person who makes everywhere home,